Ghosty the Great makes Splatoon video challenge complete. Splatoon Raiders isn't really a game that I've actively thought about for quite a while until, well, you know. But now with that new trailer and seeing more of what the actual game is, I'm thinking about how big of a deal this actually could be, not only as its own standalone thing, but for this Splatoon series in general. And I think it's fun to kind of encapsulate this moment of us waiting for this game in a video form of just me talking about how I feel about it, finally. Why waiting matters too. But yeah, I've been thinking about the trailer a lot actually, and kind of just want to talk overall about the potential that a game like this has for the Splatoon series. I mean, just getting straight into it, I've had this side order video, fully scripted and everything, that I just have in the back burner that I had written over a year ago that kind of talked about some ways I was dissatisfied by the DLC, not because it was of low quality or that it wasn't fun, but just because, like a lot of things in Splatoon 3, there was so much potential there that it just didn't quite achieve because of problems with development and everything that goes on with Splatoon games, because I think 1 minute of exposure to having to develop a Splatoon game would probably explode a normal person's mind. Literally everything that has been made for Splatoon has been notoriously very rushed, and unfortunately for Side Order, that was no different. It promoted itself as this roguelike mode that you could get upgrades for and stuff and play over and over and over again, but I think it just suffered from such a lack of variety, be it in modes or enemies, that I didn't really find myself revisiting it nearly as much as I had first anticipated. It's a pretty short experience, all things considered, and that's not to dog on Side Order. I think there's a lot of good about it, but I feel like it left a lot of people feeling disappointed. I know I for sure felt a little underwhelmed. I, of course, still found good value in it, but there was always just this sense of, if this was given more time, or even better, if it was its own standalone experience detached from the multiplayer Splatoon game, it could have been everything that we thought it would be. And I was pretty miffed about that fact. I thought Side Order as a concept was so perfect, and I just knew that after it came out that because it's a single player Splatoon thing, it will never receive an update ever again. What you get on the day of release is just what you have. There will be no changes. And I kind of just had to learn to accept that this was what it was. This is just what we got, and there's nothing we could really do about it. And like I said, there was always this nagging feeling of just, if somewhere in some other universe, if we had gotten Side Order as its own entire game, fully padded out to be an entire game, it could have been incredible. Splatoon Raiders is basically just that. After actually seeing gameplay of Splatoon Raiders, I realized that a lot of elements from it seem to be taken from or are evolutions of things that we saw in Side Order. And while noticing these similarities, I started to get very excited. Obviously, Splatoon Raiders was announced almost a year ago, which is really freaky. So we knew that this was going to be the first standalone Splatoon game that's not part of the main series, not multiplayer focused at all. It was going to be its own thing, and that idea already was very exciting, but I think it took until now for me to realize, oh my god, that is really exciting. Because I guess more generally, Splatoon single player experiences pretty much across the board have always kind of left something to be desired, with I guess the exception of maybe Octo expansion, but even then I guess it isn't perfect. Not necessarily in terms of gameplay, because the gameplay's always been high quality. I guess variety of gameplay is one thing. I mean, I guess another thing about Splatoon 3 that makes me angry to this day is the fact that it makes fun of itself for using the same ideas multiple times, and then having the big subversion in the story be that they're copying the DLC from Splatoon 2 instead of the story mode. But even then, the gameplay has always been good, even if it's been very repetitive. But I also think of just story. For a world that is so lore-rich and with such incredible world building, having the actual single-player story mode sometimes kind of feel like an afterthought in the way that they're written, at least, was something that was always very strange to me, and is something that's been debated about for, 10 fucking years. But now, with this game, we're seeing something that may potentially solve a lot of these problems, and I mean, I'll get into it later. There are some concerns, I guess, but I want to talk mainly about the things that are making me very optimistic. To jump on that point that I just made about the stories feeling kind of empty, having every protagonist that's been playable so far, except for Agent 8, be literal cookie cutter molded into the game has always been something that I've disliked, and obviously over time There's been some lore added to these characters, but in the actual gameplay experience, you wouldn't know about any of this. And I didn't even really properly think about this until I watched a little bit of ProChara analyzing the new trailer. But he makes a point, kind of jokingly, talking about how the mechanic, when they're introduced in the second trailer, is actually doing something. And I thought about that, and I realized that that is actually a rarity to see that, although it still seems like they're going to be a silent protagonist, they are a vital element to the story that isn't just a person with arms, legs, and a gun. It appears that they are the person that built the ship, or maybe they helped, or maybe they are the sole person who constructed it. And with the bot guy and all of the weapons and the modifications you can make to those weapons, that's all them. That's just their thing. Splatoon protagonists don't have things. Helping this fact, of course, is this character not being associated with the new Squid Beak Splatoon. They're presumably kind of just a guy that had a job to do and is just thrown into the story because they got unlucky, which is something actually different. I can buy the fact that this person has probably lived a life without having to just make that shit up in my head. And of course the mechanic isn't the only character, but Deep Cut as well, who sort of notoriously got shafted in their own game. They were included as villains in the story mode for Splatoon 3, which, although it's a cool idea, they have about 5 minutes of screen time outside of that. And the story kind of glosses over the fact that they're here and the villains, kind of. So they kind of just resolved that plotline really quickly with nothing really, just kind of, we're all friends now and we have to go fight a bear. But their dynamic has always been very interesting, and I really love Deep Cut. It's just that it felt like they didn't really have a time to shine, really, even though they were in the story mode. Paradoxically, it kind of felt like that made them more boring. The Squid Sisters have always been iconic characters and have been involved in the story for all of the games. And then Off the Hook had their big moment when Octo Expansion came out, which is the best story that's been told in Splatoon. But it felt like Deep Cut was just kind of waiting for that opportunity to finally give people that, like, that light bulb moment of, oh, this is why I really like these characters, because I think they are immediately likable characters and I think they're great in their own right. I just feel like they haven't had that level of exposure that Off the Hook had with Octo Expansion. And seeing that be remedied not in a DLC but in an entire full game has made me so unbelievably happy. Because I think these characters do deserve to be explored more, and in a full game, there's so much room to do that. And I'm so happy to report that, unlike Splatoon 3, the characters don't kind of just stand there. Well, I mean, they probably do that too, but they actually can get inside of the bot and help you and have their own unique ways of helping and, like, fighting enemies to further amplify those characteristics that I've been quite desperate to see more of. The dynamic of Deep Cut is probably going to be a very big part of this game, and I hope it is. I hope they get a lot of screen time of just talking or interacting with each other. Just the characters in general have me super excited just thinking about how they are expanding beyond what we've had to kind of take and deal with for years. Splatoon 3 was a game that kind of had to split its focus in so many different directions that of course certain elements were going to have to give. So going on to the point of it being its own entirely different game, having a game with an actual focus is going to do it so many favors. With a focus on the single player, it has to make the world bigger. It has to make the world more believable, and from what we've seen, it already has. It's straying more from that blocky video game level design and going more for an actual location in the Splatoon world. And since it doesn't have to accommodate for multiple modes and events and things, the world is probably just going to be more diverse and well-crafted, and I imagine that'll apply to the story as well and the characters, who are also a big focus here. And with Splatoon 3 kind of aiming to be the everything game that is a culmination of Splatoon 1, 2, and 3, and all the things they do differently and similarly, it's really refreshing to have a game with this sense of identity. Because if you ask anyone what they think of Splatoon 3, well, they could answer in any way. Maybe they prefer multiplayer, maybe they prefer Salmon Run, whatever. But with Splatoon Raiders, it is just one set experience. And as I mentioned earlier, that experience seems to evolve on the ideas that Sideout placed down, at least in some ways. You have certain similarities like damage numbers and having a companion join you in the stages, having upgrades and certain abilities that you can use in a more diverse way now because you can seemingly have like secondary weapons and support weapons and stuff like that. And you have this entire upgrade pool and abilities you can get, which is super awesome to see, because to me that feels like they potentially acknowledge the fact that Side Order could have been a lot more had they had the time to actually do it. And this game is giving them that opportunity again to fully expand on those ideas that were there, but with more time and a more focused scope, it's finally actually possible. Having a standalone Splatoon game also sets a precedent for this potentially being something that happens in the future as well. A Splatoon spin-off is something that's been talked about for a very long time, and now that we actually have it, it's really exciting to think about how they could potentially implement this in the future of the series. Giving the incredible world of Splatoon just its own game to finally breathe and be explored in a more thorough way than it would have been as it was in just a mainline game where it wasn't the sole focus. It's just such an incredible idea that gets me really excited. I guess admittedly some cause for concern is how much from Side Order will this borrow, and also how much of Salmon Run will this borrow, because we know now that it is Salmonids that are the main enemy, which I think can be a cool thing, because I do believe Salmonids, their lore is very expansive but also strangely restricted at the same time. So I think seeing these new types of Salmonids in this area and presumably having a big story around them is going to be really cool, because Salmonid lore has always been very cool. But I'm not really super concerned about utilizing old things, because I think they're purposefully using it in a new way. I was a little bit concerned seeing the Salmonids return, because Side Order was, their enemy types were kind of just, what if we had Salmonids that were less interesting? Or maybe not less interesting, but more kind of boiled down. There weren't really as many enemy types, and the enemy types that were there, some of them were directly based off of Salmonids. But I think utilizing the Salmonids to tell a different story, and also giving them new designs, and presumably having a bunch of different boss type Salmonids as well, paired with the unique single player gameplay with all of the upgrades and stuff that you can get, and having the bot as well. I feel like it's all gonna kind of just go over my head that some of this is reused, because it's going to be such a unique experience. Raiders is very intriguing to me as the weird child of the Splatoon series right now. And I mean, I don't know, I think there's just a lot to be excited about in how this could potentially move us forward in the series as a whole. With its larger sense of focus and as a standalone game, I'm putting a lot of faith into it, and I do hope it achieves that sense of scale that I'm imagining it will have. It looks perfect, pretty much. Obviously, I'll have to see more to fully understand what the actual deal is. But for right now, I am very excited to see more from this game, and obviously, I'm very excited to see it release in a few months. But yeah, that was kind of just a more ranty video about Raiders and my thoughts on it, at least. I think this game has the potential to be something very special, and I'm very excited to see what variety it brings to the series. But yeah, thanks for watching, and don't forget to flush.